And welcome to this evening's Planning Applications Committee on the 27th of July 2021. We've got a couple of items for tonight. Before I do that, I'm just going to go through a few items of housekeeping. First one is the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Virgin Money building, formerly the Yorkshire Bank, on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you do need assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. If you have a mobile phone, please can you now check that it's either turned off or switched to silent, please. Okay. In terms of apologies, I've received one apology tonight, which is from Councillor Rudkin. I believe we've got everybody else. That's correct. Okay, item number 3 then on the agenda is previous minutes. Are we okay with the minutes? Is there anyone who would like to approve the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. A seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Okay, and can I have a show of hands, all those in favour to accept the minutes? Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, I'll sign those minutes now. Okay, are there any, agenda item number 4, are there any declarations of interest other than ones that have already been previously registered? No? Any declarations of contact then? No? Okay, thank you very much. So this evening then we've got 2 items on the agenda. We're going to do them in the wrong order. So we're going to do agenda item number 2 first, because we do have 2 members of the public who wish to speak on that item. So obviously just so you can get you in and out, so you're not hanging around, we'll go with that agenda item first. So I'll ask our officer Claire if you wouldn't mind starting off the proceedings. Thank you.
This application is to convert the existing hip roof of the garage to a gabled roof to include a new enclosed staircase to the southern elevation and a dormer roof window to the front of the garage. The overall height of the garage will remain the same at 5.1 metres. The intention is that the resulting additional roof space will be used as a home gym. It has been reported to committee at the requests of Councillor Sargent and Baxter Payne and former Councillor Tandy. Objections have been received as detailed on the agenda, raising issues such as using the garage as a dwelling and loss of privacy. It has also been queried whether the floor would need to be strengthened, but this is not a planning consideration. In terms of visual amenity, the garage is to the rear of the property and therefore the changes would not be significantly visible from Lutterworth Road itself. This being the case, the building would not detract from the character of the area, appear intrusive or dominate the existing property, and is therefore considered acceptable. In relation to residential amenity, number 151 Lutterworth Road is the detached neighbour to the west and has a single-storey rear extension which is not protected, and therefore there will be no impact on original rear-facing ground floor habitable room windows. The rear wall and roof of the garage are adjacent to part of the side of this property's rear garden. There is separation distance between the northern elevation of the garage and the rear of number 151 of approximately 11.7 metres, but there are no direct views onto the garage from any of 151's ground floor windows. The dormer roof windows are on the roof plane that faces away from number 151, meaning the windows would not overlook their rear garden. Therefore, despite the fact the building is above the fence line, it is not considered that the changes would result in an oppressive or overbearing sense of enclosure to either the garage or garden of number 151. As the proposed staircase is enclosed, it would not lead to overlooking of this property. Number 155 is the detached neighbour to the east and is on the opposite boundary to that of the garage. There is a minimum distance between the closest corner of 155 to the closest part of the garage of approximately 21 metres. As a result of this and the relationship between the two buildings, officers consider there will be no significant impact on original ground floor windows to habitable rooms. The dormer roof windows are on the roof plane that faces towards number 155, meaning the windows will face their rear garden. However, there is a separation distance between the windows and the boundary of this property of 9.5 metres, which complies with distance standards. The recommendation is therefore approval, subject to conditions that the materials used are in keeping with the existing building and that the garage is not used other than for any purpose incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling house. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We have two members of the public who would like to speak on this matter. So we have Mr. and Mrs. Wood, who both are objecting to the proposal. Do you have a preference in terms of who speaks first or second? Okay, so you're allowed 3 minutes then. An officer will be timing it, and obviously, you know, I will allow you to finish as long as it's only sort of a sentence or two after the timer goes off, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Wood. Okay, thank you.
Councillors, I thank you for taking the time to listen to us and hope you appreciate our objections are due to the huge impact the changes would have on our privacy in all rooms at the rear of our property as well as our garden. The planned proposal for dormer windows would mean that both the external staircase and the windows would directly face our garden and all the windows at the rear of our property, resulting in a grave infringement on our privacy. One can only wonder the reason for having windows and staircase facing in this direction rather than facing 153's own garden. I'm sure our neighbours or anyone else would not want a building that would overlook so directly their property and garden, infringing on their privacy. I would like to draw attention to some points. The planning proposal suggests the distance from the garage to our garden is over 9.5 metres. However, when we made this measurement to the top of the garage, the roof measurement was 7.5 to 7.7 metres. If this measurement was made to the top of the garage doors where the dormer windows may align to, it could well be less than 7 metres. The current garage is not being used as a garage. It begs the question why the gym cannot be used in the downstairs area of the garage. If there are stairs inside the garage, why would external stairs be needed? And when the building of 153 and garage were approved in 2014, there was a clause in place stating the garage would not be used as a habitable building. We are therefore confused why an approval is being put forward for the garage to become a gym. We have been made aware of this clause suggesting that it could be used for people living in the family home, which seems to be a contradiction. For us, it would suggest not being a habitable building for anyone, regardless of whether they are living in the family home or not. Despite all of this, we would like a compromise to be considered and for the neighbours to build something that would not impose on our privacy or us on theirs, as we will be able to see directly into their proposed gym. We would ask that the external staircase and windows face towards their own garden be considered as an ideal solution that would not impact wholly on our privacy. We would like to make a personal plea to all of you respected members of the committee and ask each and every one of you to consider if this was a plan from your next door neighbour infringing on your privacy, would you be willing to approve it? I implore you all before I finish to consider the impact on us if you were to approve the plans that we are currently being proposed. If we are in our garden, possibly sunbathing, barbecuing, gardening, we will be seen. If we're cooking and eating in our kitchen, we will be seen. If we're relaxing in our conservatory, we will be seen. If we're having dinner in our dining room, we will be seen. If we're putting washing in our utility room, we will be seen. And our bedrooms day and night, we will be seen. If this doesn't suggest an infringement on our privacy, we really don't know what is. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wood. Has anyone got any questions for clarification at all? Yes, Councillor Evans.
It's a question to either of you. How high is the fence between the two properties, roughly?
The property is 6 foot, but
before I cast my vote, I would like to see the images provided by Mr. and Mrs. Wood.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy for those to be passed around, so we can have a look. Are there any further points of clarification before we go on to Mr. Wood? Okay, sir, in your own time.
There's not much more I can add that my wife's already said, but I would just like to ask you all to put yourselves in our position and vote how you would if it was your own properties and your own privacy at risk. We are used to our seclusion and really don't want this to change, and we cannot understand why our neighbours would want to lose this benefit also. The initial plans were altered because the staircase was at the front of the garage and would have overlooked our neighbour's property at 151, and the plans were changed because of it. We have the windows and the stairs facing our property, and we are overlooked on both counts. We don't want to be obstinate, we just want our privacy respected. We'd like to put an amendment against the current plans. Couldn't the plans be altered so the stairs are pointing away from both adjacent properties and face towards the bottom of the garden, and the windows added to the back of the property with the additions of roof-like windows instead of vertical windows facing our property? At least they will point skyward rather than directly looking onto our property. It would be ideal for a gymnasium. Again, all I can ask is, when you vote, please respect our views. We are only here because it has a massive impact on our lives, but we are willing to work with alterations to the proposed plans. If the committee is so minded, after what we have already said, to continue to approve the application, could we ask if it was be deferred whilst the measurements was checked? As the measurements cited on the agenda on pages 27 and 28, there is a separation distance between the windows and our boundary of 9.5 metres. However, the measurement I conducted was from the top of our fence to the roof of the garage, and it measured 7.5 metres. I'm not an expert in measurement, but this is a significant difference. We would therefore welcome a site visit to allow for confirmation of the actual measurements, and at the same time it would give you the full appreciation of the invasion into our privacy. Please take this opportunity to review our photos, which we believe demonstrates our concerns and infringement on our privacy. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Woods. Again, any points of clarification anyone would like to ask Mr. Woods? Yeah, sorry, Councillor Hammersley.
It appears we need some clarification with the tape measure, somehow, way, shape or form, if they're questioning
Yeah,
measurements.
we'll come on to that in a
Okay.
minute in the discussion. I'll just ask if there's anything you wanted to clarify, which the
Not at
speaker
this
actually
moment,
said.
no.
Thank you very much. Okay, what we'll do then, because it's going to take us a few minutes to have a look through the pictures, is I suggest we have an adjournment of 10 minutes just to allow every councillor present tonight enough time to have a look and study the pictures. So I'm going to pause the meeting now for 10 minutes, and we'll reconvene at 6:25. Thank you very much. So that's Councillor Evans proposing and Councillor Smith seconded.
Can I have it in the minutes that I proposed it merely for debate?
Yes, you can, Councillor Evans. So Victoria, again, if you could just make it there, so it's purely for purposes to move to discussion. Okay, so who would like to speak on this matter? Okay, so I've got Councillor Evans. Okay, thank you.
Yes. So I would like to know. Obviously, we're coming out of a pandemic, and I want to know how the council measured the distance between the proposed window and the boundary. Did an officer go to the property in person to conduct that assessment, or was it done by some weird virtual interactive website that we've never heard of before? Are you able to clarify that for us?
Our usual custom and practice is to carry out a site visit, which was carried out at number 153 by the case officer. I can't confirm 100% how that was measured. We can do it a couple of ways. We either measure on site, but 9 times out of 10 we wouldn't measure using the plans submitted and taking a measurement, in this case, from the proposed dormer to the boundary of 155.
Could I ask, Chair, would Claire be able to go to her previous slide where it showed? Yeah, that's right. I just wanted to ask, so the 9.5, that's measured from the proposed window to the fence, the boundary. Why is that not being done straight, and why is it been done horizontally?
That's just a crude example, just purely for this presentation. Just so that distance is even 9.5.
And would it have been taken from what would be the top of the proposed window, the centre, or the bottom?
I mean, I don't know 100%, but generally we take it on from the centre of the window.
So it would, what you're saying is provisionally it's been done from the centre of the proposed window to the fence.
Yeah, I can't confirm 100%, but if I was to carry out that,
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you need to add, Councillor Evans? No. Okay, so just to confirm that then, Claire, when the measurement was taken then, it was taken perpendicular to the garage. So even though it shows on the diagram it's not quite perpendicular, it was actually done perpendicularly, so at right angles.
As I said, that's just to represent the
Okay.
distance purely for this presentation.
Right, okay, so you're fairly happy that's an accurate representation of the distance. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hammersley.
More or less the same question really is, we need for these people to be 100% right with measurements from top, middle, bottom window, square onto the building, and at which points, because then it is black and white for their benefit that we wouldn't be able to refuse purely because of the measurements which the resident has taken himself. Grey area is not good for me, and it's not good for these people, but we have to be led by the conditions that prevail. And I mean, you did mention you would compromise. Is this the only planned structure or alteration to the structure that there is, or are there other plans that have been proposed but you didn't like those either, or the occupant preferred this plan to others? I'm not sure if they only propose to you this one plan, accept it or not.
Can I ask, that's to the planning officers? Yeah, so sorry, yeah, so Claire, thank you.
Right, originally, is my mouse working? Yeah. An external staircase was proposed on this end of the building. Now, being external, it would then cause overlooking, particularly for number 151. the plans were amended at our request. They've moved the staircase to this end of the building, and it is enclosed, so it's not external anymore. I'd also point out about the measurement. The speakers mentioned that they believe the measurement between the dormer and their boundary is 7 metres, 7.5. Our design guide under the Sustainable Design and Construction SPD does contain distance standards, window to window and window to garden, and that standard does require a minimum of, from a window to a garden area, of 7 metres. So if it was 7 metres, it would still comply with our distance standards.
Councillor Hammersley, any further points?
Other than if we as councillors are happy that those measurements are correct, it's very difficult for us to say no on those grounds that the people over there are saying that the measurements are not correct. So it's difficult.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Condicourt.
Thank you. This is a relatively recent development, and it seems very odd having a garage right the way down the garden like this. And so obviously when it's approved, there's some planning conditions, and I think they've been alluded to by the objectors. Can we be told what the planning conditions were on the original development? Because that might give us a guide as to see if there's anything that was put in when it was approved that would actually then say this garage can or cannot be X, Y or Z, because there's no actual right to privacy as I understand it in planning law, but there is conditions that are put down, so that might be quite key. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Councillor Kondaka?
Yes, I had a second question. On the plans, there seems to be a little step thing to the side of the garage. So I wasn't sure what the ground levels were like around the garage, because it looks like it's sunken in on one direction if the little diagram is right. Is it flush with the ground, or is it sort of on a built up or drop down ground?
Okay, I'm guessing that's your questions done, Councillor Kondaka. Any other Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I'd like to come back and explore the measurements a little bit more. We obviously need a defensible reason if we were minded to reject the application. If that measurement were double checked and it came in at just under 7 metres, would that be a defensible reason at appeal? That's to the officers. I know the 7 metres is a guidance, but looking at the images they've provided, if that were my house, I'd be seriously concerned about being overlooked. You know, you can see straight into the kitchen from where they are. Now, I know that isn't defensible because we have measurements, but if that measurement were checked and it came in a tad under 7 metres, would that go at appeal?
said, Councillor, yeah, the standards are a guide. It would depend on how significant that infringement was. If it was just short of the 7 metres, it's difficult to say, but I think it'd be quite hard to defend on appeal.
Okay, any other councillors wishing to? Yes, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the objectors for coming, Mr and Mrs Ward, raised some issues. I'm wondering whether we could, I'm not sure what the protocol is in terms of site visits at the moment, but I think it might be useful to see ground levels and distance standards for myself. So I'm going to move a site visit, but if that isn't approved by the committee, I'd like another opportunity to speak, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shepherd. So we've got a proposal there for a site visit. Is that something that we can arrange under the current COVID circumstances if we deemed it necessary?
I believe so, Chair. It might be a question for Wendy about whether we're able to, but I believe we are able to site visit as things stand.
Wendy, have you any thoughts on this at all?
Sure, I'm not too sure.
Okay, so we do need confirmation of whether site visits are possible. Assuming then that the site visit is possible, I would like to ask then whether members would like to, sorry, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I was just going to come in and second that for two reasons. One, I think it would be good for us to see the lie of the land, but two, I think that measurement should actually be checked. You know, if there is a difference in that measurement and it's substantial, we need to know that we're dealing with the right facts.
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Smith. So we do have a proposal and we do have a seconder then for a site visit, provided it's permissible under the current COVID situation. Councillor Condecourt.
If we're doing that, can we also have a copy of the conditions so we can have a read of them and see what that might be useful for us to have all the paperwork? I think this is a complicated backstory. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we can manage to get that done. Okay, so we've got a sort of a motion in front of us then that we would like a site visit. So it's been proposed and seconded. Could I have a show of hands of all those in favour of a site visit? Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 9-4. Councillor Wilson, are you against or are you abstaining?
I'm against, Chair, on the basis that even if we take the photos at face value, they show 7.7 metres, which, whether I like it or not, is within the tolerance of the residential design guide, or whatever it's now called.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. I mean, it's an interesting one because obviously it is a guide distance, and obviously we probably would like to go and see, because it's one of those decisions that I think we want to get the right decision, we want to get the right outcomes for all residents involved, and I have to say I agree with the majority here on this. I wouldn't sleep well at night knowing that we passed something which we hadn't checked and double checked at the very minimum before coming to our final decision. So yeah, I'm happy if we could sort of arrange a site visit for that. And then that obviously postpones the motion until such time as we've done a site visit. I believe that's correct, Wendy? Yeah. Okay, so the recommendation then is that we do a site visit then, and that based on that we will be checking the distances from the windows to the property boundary, making sure that we've satisfied ourselves that we've done everything and it all falls within those recommendations of the guidelines. Okay, anything you'd say at all, Darren? No.
I believe that's the item deferred, Chair.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much. So I don't think anyone else got anything else further to say. So we'll defer that item and we'll arrange to do a site visit then before we make our final decision. So obviously this will be back in front of the planning committee at some point in the not too distant future, but it's deferred for those reasons. given herein tonight. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us on to our other agenda item tonight, which is the land, item number 1 on your agenda, application 037972. So that's the Camp Hill Road, Nuneaton issue. Okay, so Claire, if I can leave that to you then.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline application for the erection of 3 dwellings on land to the rear of 148 to 160 Camp Hill Road, Nuneaton. As it's an outline application, only the principle of a residential development of 3 dwellings is being considered. Indicative plans have been submitted which show 1 detached house and a pair of semis, but that is purely for illustration only on how the site could be developed. Objections have been received as detailed on the agenda, raising issues such as impact on highway safety, the access being narrow, backland development, loss of privacy and issues with flooding and drainage. In terms of the principle of the development, the application site currently consists of the access road, which is currently grassed, and residential gardens, which are proposed to be subdivided and some new residential dwellings sited on them. 3 are proposed and shown indicatively on the plans, but all details are reserved for consideration at a later date through the submission of reserved matters, if this outline application is approved. The proposed dwellings will be located to the rear of the built form on Camp Hill Road and behind the existing property's gardens from 148 to 160. The application site is made up of what is partially garden land. It is therefore considered that since the designation applied to garden land is not one of previously developed land, this does not weigh against the development, but instead means that there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development in accordance with the NPPF. The NPPF establishes the need for the planning system to achieve sustainable development, which is composed of mutually dependent economic, social and environmental dimensions. There is consequently a presumption in favour of applications for sustainable development. In broad terms, this means that the application should be approved, providing that it is in accordance with the development plan and other policies within the NPPF, unless material considerations or adverse impacts indicate otherwise. The proposed houses would represent a residential use on land which is within the existing urban area and would not rely on greenfield sites for the addition of housing. There is a good deal of pressure for housing within the borough, although the borough plan can currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing. The surrounding area is made up of residential uses, so it is considered that this proposed use purely in terms of the actual residential use would not form a contrasting use within the area. There are concerns, however, about the siting and location of the proposal in respect of visual amenity and the character of the area, which will be covered next. So turning to visual amenity, the area is typified by a mixture of 2-storey, detached and semi-detached properties, with terraced dwellings on the opposite side of Camp Hill Road. There are some bungalows, but these are relatively infrequent as one views the street. The street scene against which this proposal will be viewed is almost entirely linear ribbon development with very little development in depth. The nearby Hillside Drive, which is located here, does show some development in depth. However, this is a little further away and forms part of a larger development of Berrington Road. Hillside Drive is part of the development here on the northern edge of the borough, and its form is wider to the east and tapers to the west, back to a linear form meeting the point of the application site. The siting of the proposed dwellings is considered to be contrived, being that it is set directly behind the residential properties of Camp Hill Road and sat awkwardly on a plot to the rear of the main built form, accessed only by a narrow access and having no direct road frontage. To the east, south and west are residential gardens, and to the north are open fields, the cumulative effect of which is to give a generally open feel to the immediate area in which the development is proposed. In view of this, officers consider that this backland development would be out of character and not in keeping with the existing layout of the area, and would fail to relate well or integrate with the surrounding area and established pattern of development, to the detriment of the established character and visual amenities of Camp Hill Road. In terms of residential amenity, the nearest residential properties likely to be impacted are the properties and their gardens at 148, 152, 154, 156, 158, 160 and 164 Camp Hill Road. In relation to 148, the indicative layout that has been submitted shows that the site could be designed so as to meet with distance standards and is therefore considered there will be no significant impact on this property. The houses will not be sited, at least on this layout, alongside the gardens of 152, 154 or 156. There could be some impact from road noise, turning and comings and goings, but officers consider that this would not be so significant as to warrant refusal on these grounds. It is considered that if an approval were to be issued, these matters could be dealt with via condition for things such as boundary treatments. In relation to 158, 160 and 164, officers consider that the site could be designed to meet with distance standards. In relation to highway safety, the proposed dwellings are to be served from an existing private driveway. County Highways have raised no objection, stated that they may wish to add conditions at the reserved matters stage. Whilst the proposal would result in an increase in vehicles along the driveway, Highways consider that the trips would be minor and any harm could be covered by conditions. In terms of flooding, the site is not within a flood risk zone and as such the Environment Agency were not consulted. Since the site is not within a flood zone, it is considered to be at the lowest risk of flooding. The recommendation is one of refusal due to the backland nature of the development, which would be out of character and not in keeping with the existing layout in the area and would fail to relate well or integrate with the surrounding area and the established pattern of development. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no public speakers on this item. So with that in mind, then we'll move. I'll ask if anyone would like to move this motion so we can get to the debate. So thank you, Councillor Wilson, and the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Smith. So which members would like to speak on this matter, if any? Councillor Kandaka.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst we're going to probably refuse it as that's the recommendation, there's just a couple of things I wanted to ask. It's mentioned about a public footpath in one of the objections. It looks on an OS map as if the path goes down that lane, but it's not a public footpath. And the second thing I just wanted to inquire about was whether that land behind is part of North Warwickshire's plan or whether North Warwickshire, if that is going to be open countryside. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. The first point, yeah, there is no adopted public footpath on the site itself. There may be some sort of informal access that's used by the public, I'm not sure, but there's no formal footpath. There is a footpath access off Manchester Road, and that's actually how I did my site visit, walked up the footpath and then across the field towards the site from the rear. There's a sort of woodland copse. What was the last point you made? Sorry, what was the last point of the... Sorry.
I was just checking that the area behind it wasn't going to be developed as part of the North Warwickshire plan, because that obviously then, if we're talking about visual amenity, has an impact on what's going on.
Yeah, the land to the north is North Warwickshire's area. I believe it is earmarked for housing in their borough plan, or their local plan. I don't have the specifics of that, but we have to treat each application on its own merits. At the moment, there is no committed development to the north. That may or may not come to fruition, so I think we have to deal with this one as things stand. Thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Are there any other members who'd like to speak on this matter? Councillor Hammersley and Councillor Shepherd.
It does appear to be a long, narrow drive, and I wonder if emergency vehicles have any input on how far it is from the main road, fire or ambulance, and waste collection, if they have any problems with where it is and the distance from the main road.
We had no comments from the fire safety or the ambulance service teams. They do get our weekly list of applications, but they've made no comment in this case. We don't have any sort of adopted policies that we test applications against in terms of fire safety and so on. We rely on consultees to flag that up to us and for other legislation to pick that up. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Hammersley, I did notice that MBBC Waste wasn't a consultee on that, and I wondered why, as they normally are asked to comment on planning documents. I was surprised they weren't, as it certainly is. It was a... No, I do agree with the officers in terms of refusal. However, if Claire could ensure that the conditions that she's mentioned are placed on the record, because if the developer did decide to go to appeal, I would hate that we wouldn't get the conditions that we've mentioned in. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And of course, yes, I completely agree with those comments, Councillor Shepherd. Any other members wishing to speak on this matter? No? Okay, in that case, can we move to the recommendation, to the vote on the recommendation? So the recommendation stands before us is to reduce planning permission for reasons as outlined previously. All those in favour? Okay, so that's oh no. All those against? Abstain? One abstention. Okay, so that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so as there is no other business, I'd like to thank all officers and councillors, members of the public for their attendance tonight. I now close this meeting. Thank you.